Rain pattered against the large windows of Denver International Airport as Nina Cole stared hopelessly at the flight status board. Canceled flashed in angry red letters beside her connecting flight to Seattle. After 14 hours of travel from New York with a layover that was supposed to be brief, this was the last thing she needed. Nina pushed her dark hair away from her face and glanced around at her fellow stranded passengers. The airport buzzed with collective frustration as hundreds of travelers scrambled to make alternative arrangements. A severe thunderstorm had grounded all flights, and according to the announcement that had just echoed through the terminal, nothing would be taking off until tomorrow morning at the earliest. She approached the customer service desk, already anticipating the answer. "Any chance of getting on a flight tonight?" she asked the harried airline employee. "I'm sorry, madam. Everything's grounded until the storm passes. We're providing hotel vouchers, but..." The woman's apologetic smile faded. "I'm afraid they're all claimed. The storm has affected too many flights." Nina sighed. "Great. So I'm sleeping in the airport tonight. We recommend trying nearby hotels directly, but they're filling up quickly." Nina thanked her and walked away, pulling her phone from her pocket to search for accommodations. As she scrolled through the rapidly dwindling options, she noticed a tall man in a well-tailored suit arguing with another airline representative. Unlike the other passengers who were shouting or making scenes, something about his controlled frustration caught her attention. "What do you mean there are no rooms available?" "There must be something," he insisted, his voice deep but measured. "I'm sorry, sir, but we've allocated all our partner hotel vouchers," the representative explained. "The storm has affected multiple airlines." The man ran a hand through his dark hair, revealing a strong jawline and thoughtful eyes. "I understand, but I need to be in Seattle by tomorrow afternoon. It's imperative." Nina recognized the same desperation she felt. She'd been in this situation before and knew how difficult it could be navigating an unfamiliar city during a travel crisis. Before she could stop herself, she approached him. "Excuse me," she said, and he turned, his intense blue eyes meeting hers. "I couldn't help overhearing." "I'm in the same situation. Flight to Seattle canceled." His expression softened slightly. "Frustrating, isn't it?" "Completely," Nina agreed. "I was just about to call some hotels directly instead of using their partner list. I know a few tricks for finding rooms during travel emergencies." "If you want, we could pool our efforts." The man studied her for a moment, seemingly weighing whether to trust a stranger before nodding. "I'd appreciate that, thank you." He extended his hand. "Kieran Hayes." "Nina Cole," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and she noticed a very expensive watch on his wrist. "Let me try a few places I know." Nina led them to a less crowded corner of the terminal where they could hear each other better. She pulled out her phone and began dialing hotels, using the loyalty memberships she'd accumulated during years of business travel. Kieran watched with interest as she navigated the conversations with practiced ease. After the fifth call, she finally struck gold. "Yes, I understand you're nearly full, but do you have anything at all? 2 rooms would be ideal, but 1 is fine if that's all you have." Kieran raised an eyebrow as she listened to the response. "1 room with 2 queen beds, perfect, we'll take it." She ended the call and turned to Kieran. "I found us a room at the Westfield Hotel about 15 minutes from here. It's not luxurious, but it's clean and reliable. They only had 1 room with 2 beds. I hope that's okay." A flash of surprise crossed his face. "You're proposing we share a room?" Nina felt her cheeks warm. "Oh. I didn't mean I thought we could split it and there are 2 beds. But if you'd rather keep looking separately..." No, he said quickly. "That's very kind of you. I'm just surprised someone would be so helpful to a complete stranger." Nina shrugged. "Travel crises bring out either the best or worst in people. I prefer the former." She paused. "Besides, the room was literally the last one they had. I couldn't just take it for myself knowing you needed a place too." Kieran's expression softened into something like admiration. Well, thank you, Nina. Let me cover the cost since you did all the work finding it. We can split it, she insisted. I would have needed a room anyway. They gathered their luggage and made their way to the taxi stand. The rain had intensified, and they huddled under the airport overhang, waiting their turn. When they finally secured a taxi, Kieran helped load their bags and held the door for Nina. The ride to the hotel was filled with the comfortable conversation of two strangers united by circumstance. Nina learned that Kieran was traveling for business, while she explained that she was heading to Seattle for her best friend's wedding. "I'm the maid of honor," she explained. "I absolutely have to be there by tomorrow night for the rehearsal dinner." "What do you do for work?" Kieran asked. "I'm a children's book illustrator," Nina replied. "I just finished the artwork for a new series, which is why I could only leave New York today." "What about you?" Kieran hesitated. "I'm in publishing. We're expanding our West Coast operations." "Oh, what a coincidence," Nina said with enthusiasm. "Maybe our paths have crossed professionally." "It's possible," he replied vaguely. "I mostly handle the business side of things." When they arrived at the hotel, Kieran insisted on paying the taxi fare despite Nina's protests. The Westfield Hotel was modest but clean, with a small lobby that was crowded with other stranded travelers. Nina approached the front desk, confirmation number ready. "Cole, yes, we have your reservation," the receptionist confirmed. "Last room available, you're lucky, 2 queen beds, 1 night." Nina turned to share a relieved smile with Kieran, who was standing a respectful distance behind her. As they made their way to the elevator, she noticed how his presence seemed to command attention without him trying. People moved aside instinctively, and even in this crowded space, he carried himself with quiet confidence. The room was basic but clean, with 2 queen beds as promised, a small desk, and a bathroom. Nina set her suitcase on the luggage rack while Kieran placed his expensive-looking leather duffel on the second bed. "I'm going to freshen up," Nina said, grabbing her toiletry bag. "It's been a long day of travel." While she was in the bathroom, Kieran made a phone call, his voice low. When she emerged, he quickly ended the call. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Just rescheduling some meetings," he explained. "It seems we won't be in Seattle until tomorrow afternoon at the earliest." "Are you hungry?" Nina asked. "I saw a restaurant attached to the hotel." Kieran checked his watch. "Starving, actually. I haven't eaten since this morning." The hotel restaurant was crowded, but the host found them a small table near the window. As they settled in, Nina couldn't help but notice how Kieran seemed to scan the room, taking everything in with a measured gaze. "So, you're a children's book illustrator," he said once they had ordered. "That sounds fascinating. How did you get into that?" Nina's face lit up. "I've been drawing since I could hold a crayon. I studied fine arts in college, but I discovered that what I really loved was creating worlds that children could lose themselves in." She took a sip of water. "My parents thought I was crazy to pursue it. They're both accountants, but it's been worth every struggle." "That takes courage," Kieran said, looking genuinely impressed. "Following your passion despite the risks. What about you? How did you end up in publishing?" Kieran paused, considering his words. "I've always loved books the way they can transform lives. I started on the financial side, but I've grown more involved in the creative direction over the years." "Any authors I might know?" "We work with quite a range," he said. "But I'd rather hear more about your illustrations. Do you have any with you?" Nina hesitated before pulling out her tablet. "I always carry my portfolio. I just finished these for a new series about a little girl who discovers she can talk to plants." Kieran leaned forward as she swiped through the colorful images. His eyes widened with genuine appreciation. "These are extraordinary," he said. "The detail, the expression in the characters. You're incredibly talented, Nina," she blushed at his praise. "Thank you, it's a labor of love." Their food arrived, and the conversation flowed easily. Nina found herself drawn to Kieran's thoughtful questions and attentive listening. He shared stories about growing up in Chicago, about his love of sailing, and his rescue dog named Edison. There was something refreshingly genuine about him, unlike some of the pretentious publishing executives she'd met in New York. After dinner, they decided to check the status of their flights. The airline's app confirmed what they'd feared: no flights until the morning, with Nina's rescheduled for 11:30 a.m. and Kieran's for 10:15 a.m. "At least we'll both make it to Seattle in time for our commitments," Nina said optimistically. "True," Kieran agreed. "This could have been much worse." Back in the room, they fell into the comfortable routine of two people who respected each other's space. Nina changed into pajamas in the bathroom while Kieran answered emails. When she emerged, he took his turn in the bathroom. Nina climbed into bed and pulled out her sketchbook, working on some preliminary drawings for her next project. When Kieran returned wearing a plain white t-shirt and dark pajama bottoms, she couldn't help but notice how different he looked outside of his business suit, more approachable, yet still carrying that same quiet strength. "You mind if I work for a bit?" he asked, gesturing to the desk. "Not at all," Nina replied. "I'm just sketching before bed." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the rain still pattering against the window. Eventually, Nina yawned and set her sketchbook aside. "I think I'm going to call it a night," she said. "It's been a long day." "Of course," Kieran replied, closing his laptop. "I should get some rest too, early flight tomorrow." As Nina switched off her bedside lamp, she felt oddly content despite the travel disruption. "Thank you for being such a good roommate," she said softly. This could have been awkward, but it wasn't. In the dim light from the desk lamp, she saw him smile. "I should be thanking you. You're the one who rescued me from a night on an airport bench." "Good night, Kieran." "Good night, Nina." Morning came with clearing skies and sunshine streaming through the hotel window. Nina woke to find Kieran already dressed and working quietly at the desk. "Good morning," he said when he noticed her stirring. "I ordered some coffee and breakfast. I hope you don't mind." "That's incredibly thoughtful," Nina replied, sitting up and running a hand through her tousled hair. "What time is it?" "Just after 7. I checked the flight status. Everything seems to be on schedule so far." They shared a simple breakfast of coffee, fruit, and pastries before taking turns getting ready. As they prepared to leave, Nina felt a strange reluctance. In the space of less than 24 hours, she'd grown to enjoy Kieran's company. "Well," she said as they gathered their luggage, "I guess this is where we part ways. It was really nice meeting you, Kieran." "Nina," he said, hesitating. "Would it be all right if I got your number? Maybe we could meet up in Seattle. I'll be there for a few days." Nina smiled, pleasantly surprised. "I'd like that." They exchanged numbers before heading downstairs to check out. At the front desk, the receptionist seemed flustered when Kieran presented his credit card. "Mr. Hayes, I didn't realize it was you staying with us," she said. Nina glanced at him curiously, but Kieran just smiled politely at the receptionist. "The room was excellent, thank you." Outside, they shared a taxi back to the airport. As they approached the terminal, Kieran turned to her. "My gate is in Concourse C, yours." "Concourse B," Nina replied, feeling a pang of disappointment. "I guess this is goodbye for now." "For now," he agreed. "I'll call you in Seattle." They parted with a brief hug that felt oddly significant. Nina watched him walk away, struck by how much she was looking forward to seeing him again. Her flight to Seattle was uneventful, and she arrived at her hotel with just enough time to change before heading to her friend's rehearsal dinner. Throughout the evening, she found herself checking her phone, hoping for a message from Kieran. It came the next morning. "Coffee at Pike Place, 11 a.m. "There's something I should explain." Nina arrived at the famous market a few minutes early, enjoying the vibrant atmosphere and waterfront views. She spotted Kieran waiting near the original Starbucks, looking even more handsome in casual clothes, dark jeans, and a blue button-down that matched his eyes. "Hi," she said, suddenly feeling shy. "Nina," he smiled warmly. "You look beautiful." He led her to a small cafe with a view of Elliott Bay. After they ordered, Kieran took a deep breath. "There's something I should have told you yesterday," he began. "I wasn't entirely truthful about my job." Nina raised an eyebrow. "You're not in publishing, I am, but—" He hesitated. "I'm the CEO of Horizon Publishing Group." Nina stared at him. "Horizon? As in one of the largest publishing houses in the country," Kieran nodded. "I was in New York meeting with our board of directors. The Seattle trip is to finalize the acquisition of Pacific Northwest Press." "Why didn't you tell me?" Nina asked, trying to process this revelation. "When we met, you were just helping a stranded stranger," Kieran explained. "You were so genuine, so kind without any agenda. Once we started talking, I didn't want to change that dynamic. It's rare for me to meet someone who doesn't immediately see my position first and me second." Nina considered this. "I can understand that, but why tell me now? Because I want to see you again properly this time, no secrets." His blue eyes held hers. "And because Horizon publishes the Bloom and Grow series that you just illustrated." Nina's eyes widened. "You're my publisher's boss." Kieran smiled. "Technically, yes, but that's not why I want to see you again. I felt a connection with you that had nothing to do with business." "So did I," Nina admitted, "but this does complicate things." "Only if we let it," Kieran replied. "There's no direct professional conflict. We work in entirely different divisions. But if you're uncomfortable, I'm not," Nina interrupted. "Just processing. It's not every day you help a CEO find a hotel room." They both laughed, breaking the tension. Over coffee, Kieran told her about his journey with Horizon, how he'd started as a financial analyst, and eventually led a management buyout when the previous owners wanted to sell to a media conglomerate. "I was determined to keep Horizon focused on quality literature rather than just the bottom line," he explained. "It hasn't always been easy, but it's been worth it." Nina shared more about her own career struggles, the rejections she'd faced before finally breaking through with her distinctive illustration style. After coffee, Kieran suggested a walk along the waterfront. As they strolled in the bright Seattle sunshine, their hands occasionally brushing, Nina felt a growing certainty that this chance meeting was turning into something significant. "When do you return to New York?" Kieran asked. "Tuesday," Nina replied. "The wedding is tomorrow." "I'm here until Wednesday," he said. "Would you have dinner with me tonight? After your wedding preparations, of course." "I'd love that," she smiled. That evening, Kieran took her to a spectacular restaurant overlooking the water. As they enjoyed fresh seafood and watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Nina realized she hadn't felt this comfortable with someone in years. "You know," she said, "if someone had told me yesterday morning that being stranded in Denver would lead to one of the best dates I've ever had, I wouldn't have believed them." Kieran's eyes crinkled when he smiled. "I've been thinking the same thing. Sometimes the most unexpected detours lead us exactly where we need to be." After dinner, they walked along the waterfront again, the city lights reflecting on the dark water. When Kieran took her hand, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I have to ask," Nina said. "What happens when we go back to our regular lives? You in Chicago, me in New York. We figure it out," Kieran replied simply. "If this is worth pursuing, and I believe it is, we'll find a way. Horizon has offices in New York that I visit regularly, and Chicago isn't that far." "You make it sound so simple," Nina said. "Not simple," he corrected. "Worth it." When he kissed her under the stars with the gentle sound of waves in the background, Nina knew he was right. The next day was consumed by wedding activities, but Kieran texted her throughout, sending a photo of himself exploring the Space Needle and wishing her a wonderful time at her friend's ceremony. He even sent a beautiful bouquet to her hotel room with a note, "For the most beautiful woman at the wedding after the bride, of course." The gesture made Nina's heart flutter. At the reception, while her friends danced and celebrated, she found herself counting the hours until she could see Kieran again. The following morning, he picked her up early and took her to breakfast before driving north to Snoqualmie Falls. As they hiked the trail together, talking and laughing, Nina marveled at how quickly she'd grown to care for him. "I've been thinking," Kieran said as they stood at the overlook, watching the powerful waterfall cascade down. Horizon is launching a new children's book imprint next year. We're focusing on stories that combine education and imagination, exactly the kind of work you do. Nina looked at him suspiciously. Are you offering me a job? Not exactly, he smiled. More like suggesting a possible collaboration. The editorial team makes those decisions, not me. But I could introduce you to the director of the new imprint when you're back in New York. No pressure, just an opportunity if you're interested. I'd like that, Nina said. As long as it's clear that it's separate from this, she gestured between them. Absolutely, Kieran agreed. What's happening between us is personal, not professional. That evening, they had dinner at his hotel, a luxurious suite with a private terrace overlooking the city. As they sat together after the meal, Kieran took her hand. I don't want to say goodbye tomorrow, he admitted. Neither do I, Nina replied softly. Then let's not, he said. Let's make this the beginning, not an ending. They spent their final day in Seattle visiting the Museum of Pop Culture, where they debated favorite books and films, discovering all the ways their tastes aligned and differed. Every moment reinforced what they both already knew: there was something special between them worth pursuing. At the airport the next day, Nina prepared to board her flight to New York while Kieran would leave for Chicago hours later. I'll call you tonight, he promised, holding her close. I'll be waiting, she replied. Over the following weeks, they talked daily. Kieran flew to New York twice for business, extending his stays to spend time with Nina. She introduced him to her favorite hidden corners of the city, the small gallery in Brooklyn that had given her her first exhibition, the cozy bookshop where she'd spent countless hours finding inspiration, the rooftop garden where she sketched when seeking peace. When Nina visited Chicago a month later, Kieran showed her his world, the Horizon headquarters where he'd built his dream, the lakefront park where he ran each morning, his elegant but comfortable home where Edison the retriever immediately adopted Nina as his new favorite human. 3 months after their chance meeting in Denver, Kieran surprised Nina by showing up at her New York apartment on a random Wednesday evening. What are you doing here? She asked, delighted but confused. I thought you were in meetings all day. I was, he confirmed, stepping inside. But then I flew here because I couldn't wait until Friday to see you. He pulled a small wrapped package from his coat pocket. I have something for you. Nina unwrapped it to find a beautiful leather-bound sketchbook with her initials embossed on the cover. Inside the front cover was a handwritten note, for all the new stories we'll create together. Kieran, it's beautiful, she said, touched by his thoughtfulness. There's something else, he said, looking suddenly nervous. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small velvet box. Nina's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a delicate ring with a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. I know it's fast, he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. But when you know, meeting you was the best detour my life has ever taken. I love you, Nina Cole. Will you marry me? Tears filled Nina's eyes as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. I love you too. As he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, Nina marveled at how a canceled flight and a simple act of kindness had changed both their lives forever. 1 year later, they stood together in the garden of their new home, a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn with a publishing office for Kieran to work remotely, and a sun-filled studio for Nina's illustrations. Edison lounged at their feet as they welcomed friends and family to celebrate both their marriage and the launch of Horizon's new children's imprint, featuring Nina's artwork for its flagship series. Did you ever imagine, Kieran asked as they watched the sunset from their garden, that helping a stranded stranger find a hotel room would lead to all this? Nina leaned against his shoulder, her wedding ring catching the golden light. Not in my wildest dreams, she smiled. But it's better than anything I could have illustrated. And that's saying something, Kieran replied, kissing her softly, because you, Nina Hayes, can illustrate magic. As they rejoined their celebration, surrounded by love and laughter, Nina reflected on how the most beautiful stories often begin in the most unexpected ways, with a canceled flight, a rainy night, and the simple decision to help a stranger in need.